Let's get one thing straight. Christopher Columbus was terrible at his job, and his job was knowing where things are. He thought the Earth was about 75% of its actual size, a mathematical error so profound that it's like trying to bake a cake and accidentally inventing a car bomb. Based on his hilariously wrong calculations, he pitched a voyage to the Spanish crown, promising a quick hop to Asia. Everyone educated at the time knew the world was round, but they also knew it was, big. They told him his plan was insane, not because they were flat earthers, but because they understood basic geometry. He was essentially the first guy in history to ignore all the experts and succeed entirely by accident, a truly inspiring message for idiots everywhere. He wasn't aiming for a new world, he was just catastrophically lost. Upon landing in the Bahamas in October 1492, Columbus encountered the Taino people. His first thought wasn't, wow, a vibrant new culture, but rather, how can I efficiently exploit these people? He wrote in his own journal that they were handsome, intelligent, and gentle. He also noted they would make good servants and could be subjugated with 50 men and made to do whatever we want. It's the kind of chilling observation you'd expect from a serial killer sizing up a victim, not a celebrated explorer. He saw their generosity and lack of iron weapons not as virtues, but as vulnerabilities. He wasn't just observing, he was taking inventory for a future of forced labor and conquest. His mind immediately went to profit margins, not human dignity. Back in Hispaniola, Columbus needed to deliver a return on investment to his royal patrons. Gold was the answer. Since there wasn't nearly as much as he'd promised, he instituted a tribute system that was pure, distilled evil. Every Taino over the age of 14 was required to deliver a hawk's bell full of gold dust every 3 months. For a chief, the quota was a calabash gourd. The problem was there was very little surface gold. The quota was impossible. When a Taino individual failed to meet their quota, the Spanish punishment was simple and grotesque. They would have their hands cut off and tied around their neck to serve as a warning. This wasn't a desperate measure. It was a calculated system of terror designed to work a population to death for imaginary profits. Beyond being a genocidal maniac, Columbus was also an astonishingly incompetent administrator. As governor of the new colony, he managed to alienate absolutely everyone. His own Spanish colonists hated him. They accused him of hoarding wealth, ruling as a tyrant, and using torture and mutilation as his primary tools of governance, which, to be fair, was accurate. Things got so bad that the settlers launched a full-blown rebellion against him. He couldn't manage his own people, let alone an entire island. His brothers, whom he put in charge, were apparently cut from the same cloth. The entire Columbus family administration was a masterclass in how to turn a potential paradise into a failed state, fueled by paranoia and brutality in record time. Eventually, word of this catastrophic mismanagement reached Spain. The crown sent an investigator, Francisco de Bobadilla, in 1500 to see what was going on. He arrived to find a colony in utter chaos and bodies of rebellious Spaniards hanging from gallows. Bobadilla's investigation was swift. He collected testimony after testimony from colonists detailing the Columbus brothers' tyranny. The conclusion was so damning that Bobadilla did something pretty much unheard of. He arrested the admiral of the ocean sea, and his brothers. Christopher Columbus, the great discoverer, was clapped in irons and shipped back to Spain as a prisoner. Being fired is one thing. Being sent home in chains by your own bosses suggests you probably shouldn't have listed people skills on your resume. It's tempting to think Columbus's actions were driven solely by greed, but that's missing a key ingredient. He was also profoundly delusional. In his later years, he compiled something called the Book of Prophecies. This wasn't just a religious text, it was his personal manifesto, arguing that his voyages were a literal fulfillment of biblical prophecy. He wasn't an explorer, you see, he was God's chosen messenger. He believed he was destined to find the Garden of Eden, fund a final crusade to reclaim Jerusalem, and personally kickstart the apocalypse. This messianic complex reframes his cruelty. He wasn't just committing atrocities for gold, he was committing them for God as part of a divine plan that existed entirely inside his own head. Psychologically, that's a much scarier motivation. Among his many other terrible firsts, Columbus was the father of the transatlantic slave trade. In 1495, he rounded up 1,600 Taino men, women, and children. He selected the 500 best specimens, crammed them onto ships, and sent them to Spain to be sold at the slave market in Seville. 200 died on the horrific voyage. This wasn't an accidental byproduct of conquest. It was a deliberate business venture. He wrote to the crown suggesting a regular trade in enslaved people as a way to make the colonies profitable. Queen Isabella was allegedly displeased, but the precedent was set. The very first trade route from the New World to the Old wasn't for spices or gold, but for human beings. The long-term result of Columbus's arrival was nothing short of a demographic cataclysm. The population of Hispaniola when he arrived is estimated to be anywhere from 300,000 to over 1 million people. Within 20 years, it was down to around 28,000. By the mid-16th century, the Taino as a distinct people were effectively extinct on the island. This wasn't just disease, though that was a massive factor. This was a direct result of his policies: systematic murder, enslavement, overwork, and starvation. There are reports from Spanish priests of mass suicides, where Taino women would poison their own children to save them from the Spanish. Calling it a tragedy is an understatement. It was a methodical, efficient, and almost complete annihilation of a people, set in motion by one man's greed and fanaticism. Perhaps the most surreal piece of the whole puzzle was a legal document called the requerimiento, or the requirement. The Spanish were obsessed with legal justifications, so conquistadors would find a village and, from a safe distance, a notary would read a long document in Spanish or Latin to people who understood neither. It explained the history of the world, the Pope, and demanded the listeners accept Spanish rule and convert to Christianity immediately. If they didn't, or more accurately, couldn't possibly understand the offer, the document stated the Spanish were legally cleared to wage a just war against them, enslave their families, and take their property. It was the 15th century equivalent of an unreadable I agree button, except clicking decline meant your entire world would be burned to the ground. So, what are we left with? A man who was a terrible navigator, a tyrannical governor, a religious fanatic with a messiah complex, a pioneer of the slave trade, and the architect of a genocide. He wasn't a flawed hero, the flaws were the entire story. The hero part is a myth constructed centuries later, particularly in the United States, by writers who needed a non-British founding figure to build a national story around. They picked a Genoese sailor working for Spain who never set foot in North America. It makes perfect sense if you don't think about it at all. Columbus didn't discover America, he stumbled upon it while failing to do something else. And in the process, he revealed a capacity for cruelty that is truly breathtaking, setting a grim precedent for the centuries to come. His legacy isn't one of discovery, but of the catastrophic consequences of putting a greedy, delusional psychopath in charge of a fleet of ships. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!